I'd been babysitting since I was 16, but by 17 it was almost a steady evening job. The Collins family hired me twice a week to watch their 2 kids while the parents went to dance classes. Emma was 6, Noah was 4. Usually I'd come at 7 in the evening, put the kids to bed by 9, and the parents would return by 11. It was a quiet neighborhood of townhouses in the suburbs where everyone knew their neighbors and nothing serious ever happened. That Wednesday in October, everything started as usual. I arrived, Mrs. Collins left me pizza in the oven and an emergency contact list on the fridge, though I already knew them by heart. The kids and I had dinner, played with blocks, watched a cartoon. By 8:30 they were brushing their teeth and I was getting ready to read them a bedtime story. I remember thinking the street outside sounded louder than normal. Maybe a car door slammed twice? But I didn't pause on it. I tucked Emma's blanket, told Noah he could choose the story, and started toward the bookshelf. That's when the front door burst open with such a crash that I jumped in place. I shouted, "Hello?" before I could even think, and Emma called from the bathroom, "Who is it?" I told them to stay put and took 3 steps down the stairs. A woman burst into the house, a neighbor from across the street, Mrs. Chen, whom I'd seen a couple times. She was barefoot, in home clothes, hair messy, face wet with tears. She slammed the door, slid the deadbolt, and leaned against it like she was holding back a flood. "Don't open it," she yelled at me. "Don't open it for anyone." The kids ran out of the bathroom, eyes wide. I put my hands up at them like stop signs. "Back upstairs," I said. "Now." I came down 2 more steps, trying to understand. Mrs. Chen was breathing hard, hands shaking so much she fumbled the chain. "Should I call the police?" I asked. She nodded fast, still pressed to the door. "He'll come here. He knows I'm here." Her voice cracked on nose. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, already steering the kids up with my elbow. Emma whispered, "What's wrong?" And I just said, "We're safe. Keep going." The operator picked up and I started, "There's a neighbor in the house who's in danger." But I didn't finish. Outside came a bang on the door. 1, 2, 3. Heavy fists, full strength, rattling the wood like it would split. Mrs. Chen cringed, covering her mouth with her hand, trying not to make a sound. I still held the phone to my ear, the operator telling me to stay on the line. Help was already on the way. Emma started crying. Noah hid behind my leg. The knocking didn't stop, methodical, heavy, insistent. Then a male voice sounded from outside, low and angry. "Open the door, Lisa. I know you're there. Think you can hide from me?" Mrs. Chen trembled all over. I tried to pitch my voice steady and loud enough to carry. "There are children here. Police are already coming. Leave." For a second, there was silence. I could hear my own breathing and the kids' little gasps. Then a crash. Something heavy slammed into the front door, like a shoulder or a tool. The whole frame shuddered. Mrs. Chen screamed. The kids cried louder. "Go," I told Emma and Noah, pulling them by both wrists up the stairs. The phone was wedged between my ear and shoulder, the operator repeating, "Stay with me. Officers are en route." I kept moving because standing still felt like the worst choice. Another blow hit the door. The deadbolt squealed. At the top of the stairs, I hustled them into Emma's room because it had a real lock and a solid dresser I could drag. "Under the bed," I said, then caught myself. "No, closet. Both of you." They squeezed in. I turned the lock with my thumb, and my hand slipped from sweat. The operator asked for the address again, so I read it off the emergency list I'd taken a photo of weeks ago, careful and slow so I didn't mess it up. Downstairs, the front door took another hit, louder. Mrs. Chen gave this small animal sound. I dragged Emma's dresser in front of the door, the legs scraping the wood loud enough that I winced. "Ma'am, officers are close," the operator said. Do not engage. Stay where you are. There's a woman downstairs, I said. She's by the door. I didn't want to leave her. I also wasn't going to walk the kids back past the stairs. I thought about the back stairs to the kitchen. No. Bad line of sight if he got in. Lisa, the man yelled, closer to the peephole. Last warning. Another slam. Something cracked. I heard Mrs. Chen whispering. Maybe a prayer. Maybe just please. Can you lock the bedroom? The operator asked. Yes, I said, eye on the hall. Is there access to the attic? No. Do you see any weapons? No, I said. I did a quick scan. Chair, lamp, Emma's toy bin, nothing useful. I pulled the kids' closet door tighter and told them to cover their ears. The next crash downstairs came with splinters. I could picture the deadbolt screws pulling through. I said loud enough to Carrie, "We're upstairs. The police are almost here." I don't know if I was warning him or trying to anchor myself. The floor vibrated with another hit. I felt it through my toes. The operator kept her voice calm. "They're turning onto your street." Just a few minutes left, I locked the kids and myself in Emma's room, shoved the dresser against the door, and sat them in the far corner by the closet. I kept the phone to my ear, though my hands shook so hard I almost dropped it. The operator said the patrol was on our street, seconds out. I pulled the curtain with 2 fingers. Blue and red flashed across the houses. The banging downstairs stopped. Fast footsteps pounded off the porch and away. Mrs. Chen screamed for the police to open the door. Then voices answered and a radio crackled. An officer knocked on our door and said my name and the family name. I slid the dresser back and opened up a few inches. Uniform, badge, calm eyes. "We're coming out," I said. Emma clutched my shirt. Noah asked if the man was gone. "For now," I told him, and kept them behind me down the hall. Downstairs, Mrs. Chen sat on the couch with a blanket. An officer gave her water. Another stood at the doorway, radio up. Suspect fled on foot. Perimeter starting. The deadbolt plate was bent. Shoe scuffs marked the threshold. The officer with the notepad pulled me aside and kept it simple. The man was her ex. They'd argued. He broke into her house. She ran here. No weapon seen. He was aggressive and drunk. He asked me to walk through what happened. I gave him the order. Door, 911, threats, hits, lights, footsteps. He wrote and relayed. 2 officers checked the backyard and alley. A third did a quick sweep of windows and the back door. A female officer crouched to talk to the kids about cartoons, which pulled their breathing down to something manageable. I gave them the Collinses' numbers from the list on the fridge. Someone called. Someone else photographed the door frame and the prints on the step. The operator finally let me hang up after confirming the officers were with us and that I wasn't hurt. I said I was fine, but my ear burned from pressing the phone, and my hands still wouldn't stop shaking. Police stayed in the house until the Collinses got back, which was half an hour later. The parents took the kids into their bedroom and did the calm voices routine. Water, stuffed animals, the same lines over and over, while I finished giving my statement. Mrs. Chen apologized to me in a shaky whisper and said she didn't know where else to run. I told her it was okay, because it was. She picked the house with kids and lights, and I would have done the same. The officers kept checking their radios. About an hour after it started, they said units had found him trying to hide in the little park near the creek. They took him in for harassment and assault. Mrs. Collins hugged me and told me I did great, that I did everything right, that I kept the kids safe. Mr. Collins paid me for the night and insisted on calling a taxi to take me home, which I didn't argue with. I got back to my place and lay there until morning without sleeping, just replaying the minutes at the door. The voice, the hits, the metal rasp of the deadbolt, and the sound of Emma trying not to cry. What stuck the most was her face when she asked why the man was yelling, like she wanted to make it a simple answer. I kept babysitting after that, but I got picky about families and blocks, and I always lock the doors right when I arrive. I never thought honking a car horn could make someone want to kill me. But that's exactly what happened when I locked eyes with a man holding a knife over an unconscious woman on a parking lot. It was March 2014, and I was working as a courier for a small express delivery service, spending my days driving around suburbs dropping off packages. After finishing my morning route, I decided to take a break and pulled into a shopping center parking lot to grab coffee from a cafe on the first floor. The lot was about half full, typical for a weekday around noon. I parked in the far row, killed the engine, and reached for my bag. I had just opened my door when I heard a woman scream, short, choked off, and the kind of scuffling you hear when someone's shoes slide on concrete. It came from the service entrance behind a big box store. I turned and saw a man in a dark jacket dragging a woman in a store uniform toward the loading dock, his hand clamped over her mouth so tight her cheeks were pushed in. For a second I thought maybe it was a domestic argument that got out of hand, and then I saw her eyes. Wide, panicked. She was kicking backward, heel scraping, and he had her by the elbow like a handle on luggage. My body froze so hard it felt like my chest forgot how to work. I ducked down behind my open car door, stupid, instinctive, just trying to not be a silhouette. I kept watching through the gap by the side mirror. The man was heavy through the shoulders, mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a small ponytail that kept slipping. The woman kept twisting, grabbing at his wrist, and he barely shifted. Then I caught a glint. He had a folding knife in his free hand, the blade out and angled against the side of her neck. The woman went rigid. He stopped wrestling and just dragged, one step, two, heel scrape, toward a white cargo van nosed up near the service door like it belonged there. My head was buzzing so loud I couldn't hear traffic anymore. Call the police right now. But if I spoke, he might hear. If I moved too much, he might notice. Also the dumb thought. If I called and started explaining where I was, he could be gone before I even finished shopping center. I slid my phone out, unlocked it with my thumb, and pointed the camera up from waist level. No zoom, no flash, no sound. I hit record. The red dot made my stomach flip. He glanced around as he hauled her. He wasn't rushing, which scared me more. He kept the blade nestled close to her skin like he'd practiced it. They were almost to the van's side door. I realized I'd memorized stupid details. White van, no logos, a dent on the rear panel, front plate crooked, because my brain refused to do anything else useful. The woman tried to dig her shoes into the ground, but they just skidded. I thought about shouting, "Hey!" and imagined him wheeling on me and sprinting. My throat went dry. I held the phone lower. Then the woman jerked, sudden and hard, dropping her weight like she'd rehearsed that instead. He stumbled. She twisted her head and I saw her mouth open under his hand. The man slammed the knife handle into the side of her head. The sound was a dull thud even from where I was, and she crumpled to the asphalt. He bent over her, fist rising for another strike, and something in me just snapped. I slammed my palm onto my horn and held it. A long, solid blast. I let it go and hit it again. The sound bounced off the storefronts and made the birds in the trees explode up and away. He spun toward me. For a second we stared at each other across the rows of cars, me half crouched behind my door, him framed by the van. He saw the phone in my hand even though I tried to keep it low. His face twisted, like he wanted to tear through every car between us. He took one step my way, knife still in his hand, and my body tried to climb into itself. I don't know why I expected him to run at me full tilt. Probably because that's exactly what his eyes said he wanted to do. But he didn't. He looked past me, maybe clocking the cafe windows, the people turning toward the noise, the cameras mounted up under the eaves. He made a decision right there. He shoved the woman's shoulder with his shoe to make sure she stayed down, turned, and yanked the van's door. I heard the engine catch like it had already been idling. The tires squealed as he tore out of the spot, cut a wide arc, and shot for the exit. I stayed crouched for 1 second longer, staring at the woman not moving on the ground. Then my hands finally worked. I thumbed out of the camera and hit 911. My fingers shook so bad I almost dropped the phone. I pressed it to my ear and said my name twice before the words came out. I immediately dialed 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. While I was explaining to the dispatcher what happened, I ran over to the woman. She was conscious but dazed, blood running from a cut on her head. I told her help was coming and pressed my jacket against the wound, careful not to move her neck. The dispatcher asked for the store name, nearby signs, and whether the attacker had left. I said yes. White cargo van with a dent on the rear panel, partial plate, turned toward the main road. She tried to sit up. I told her to lie still and asked if anything else hurt. She shook her head and winced, and I kept pressure where the blood was seeping. The ambulance and police arrived in under 10 minutes. Paramedics took over fast, swapped my jacket for gauze, and put a collar on her before lifting her to a stretcher. She kept asking if she was late getting back. An officer took my name. I gave the best description I could. Heavy build, mid-30s, dark ponytail, folding knife. I showed them the video on my phone. The face was blurry, but the van was clear, with the dent and most of the plate visible. An officer said, "You probably saved her life." I felt guilty that I hid it first and only honked because I panicked. The detective arrived, copied the video, took my contact information, and said they'd be in touch for a statement. 2 days later, the detective called. They had him finally. The plate fragment and the dent matched a van registered to his cousin, and my video plus my statement gave them what they needed. He was the victim's ex-boyfriend. He'd been showing up at her store and waiting outside during lunch for weeks. That day, he stood by the service door until she came out, then grabbed her when no one was looking. Hearing that made me angry because it wasn't random. It was planned. He told me she had a concussion and stitches but no skull fracture, and that she was home with family. He added that she asked the police to give me her number. When I called, she started crying as soon as I said who I was. She kept thanking me over and over. I told her I didn't do anything special. She said, "You did enough." We talked a few minutes about what happened and what the police told her. She said she'd warned her manager and HR, but there hadn't been direct threats, and security never caught him doing anything they could act on. A few weeks later, when she felt better, we met at a cafe near the store. She had a small bandage at her hairline and fading bruises. She brought a simple thank you card her sister picked out. She told me the horn felt like the last chance to move, and her body just did it. "Either I get away right then, or I don't," she said. I told her I hid, and only honked because I panicked. She shook her head and said, "You made him look up." That's all I needed. I still replay it every single day. What if I hadn't honked? What if I'd only called, stayed quiet, and driven to my next stop because it wasn't technically my problem? Would he have had 1 more minute? 5 more minutes? I really hate that I froze first, and I hate that the thing that helped was simple and almost accidental. But the horn made people look, cameras caught angles, and he decided not to risk it. I keep the jacket in my trunk as a reminder that one noisy, imperfect thing can still matter. It happened last summer when I was working nights at this downtown bar. Fridays were the worst. Crowded until last call, sticky floors, people arguing about tabs like I was stealing $1 from them personally. My shift ended at 3. I clocked out, grabbed my backpack from under the bar, and stepped into that flat, dead air the city gets at that hour. The parking lot behind the building was mostly empty, except for a couple cars I recognized from staff. I unlocked my Civic, sat down, and just let myself breathe with the engine idling. Music low. I was beat. I pulled out onto the street and took the usual route through the industrial district. Warehouses, chain-link fences, those blinking red lights on loading bays that make you think of alarms even when nothing's wrong. In the mirror, I saw headlights swing wide and settle behind me. Dark sedan, heavy tint. It had come from our lot, which didn't register at first. It could have been anyone. 2 car lengths back, steady. I went 5 blocks and took a right to cut toward a residential strip where the lights are warmer and the speed bumps keep you honest. The sedan turned too. I told myself no big deal. Same direction, same time. You notice patterns that aren't patterns when you're wiped. But I noticed the spacing. Still 2 car lengths. No drift, no impatience, no hesitation at the stop sign when I hesitated. Like whoever was driving had practiced keeping that exact gap. I checked what I could see through the rear window. Nothing but my own headlights shining on tint. My jaw tightened. I tapped the brake a little harder than necessary before the next intersection. The sedan braked the exact same way. Maybe it was dumb to care about little things like that, but bartending teaches you to notice little things. Hands that shake before someone asks for water. The way someone watches the door more than their drink. Could have been a coincidence, but I decided to test it. At the next intersection, I turned left, even though straight was my route. I never go left there. The sedan turned left, same line, same distance, like we were tied together with an invisible rope. Now we were pointed away from apartments and closer to the warehouses again. No good places to pull off, no traffic, no witnesses. I bumped my speed up to 10 over. The sedan matched it. No aggro behavior. No headlights flashing. Just mirroring. My palms got slick on the wheel, and I ran options. Call 911 with nothing to report but a feeling. They'll tell you to find a public place. Find a 24-hour gas station nearby. None I trusted in this direction. Or loop until I could cut towards something open. I rolled up on a red light at a dead intersection and stopped hard even though there wasn't a single car to cross. The sedan stopped, exactly 2 car lengths back again. Didn't creep, didn't edge, just sat there. I grabbed my phone and called my roommate Marcus on speaker. He picked up sounding alert in that way people do when their brain recognizes your call time is wrong. I told him fast. Someone's tailing me, dark sedan. Been on me since the lot. He didn't waste time with questions. Do not come home, he said. Go to the 24-hour station on Oak. 10 minutes if you hit the greens. Stay on the main roads, I said. What if they're a block behind? He said. Good. Let them follow you to cops. That made sense. I checked the mirror. Still there. And I did something I wouldn't normally do. Cranked a U-turn over the double yellow on the stale red. If they were half asleep, I'd shake them. They weren't. The sedan made a calm U-turn too, like it had been waiting for me to try it. Now the distance opened a bit, maybe 3 car lengths, almost casual, which bothered me more than if they'd gunned it. I took the next right, then another right to get back toward the main drag. Empty streets slipped by. I hit a yellow and went through. The sedan did too, unbothered. No horn. No attempt to close the gap. It felt like playing tag with someone who never runs, just glides, and somehow you're always the one out of breath. I told Marcus where I was, street by street, so if something happened, there'd be a breadcrumb trail. He said he was calling the station to give them a heads up. If you see a cruiser, flash them, he added. Don't stop anywhere dark. I kept it clean. No random alleys, no sudden cuts I couldn't see through. I passed an all-night diner I didn't trust. The parking lot was too open, too many blind spots, and kept going. A delivery truck pulled out ahead of me, and I tucked behind it, figuring steel between us wouldn't hurt. The sedan floated back a little and then slid into the next lane, keeping pace at my rear quarter like they wanted a better angle. I adjusted too. They adjusted again. No plate I could read through the tint. I said out loud, "Okay." Not to anyone, just to keep my own breathing steady. Marcus said, "You're almost there. Oak and 12th. Keep it straight." 2 more lights. The second turned yellow and I pushed it, the sedan doing the same with that same calm precision. Whoever was driving wasn't drunk, wasn't panicking, wasn't random. They knew what they were doing. It hit me that I hadn't seen them at the bar. I know our regulars. I know the folks who hang in the lot to smoke. This felt planned, not accidental. And if it was planned, home was off limits. The police station came into view. A lit sign, a couple cruisers angled near the entrance, glass front bright like a showroom compared to the rest of the block. I signaled early, checked the mirror one more time, and got ready to turn sharply into the parking lot. But exactly 1 block before the station, the sedan suddenly turned into an alley and disappeared, like it was never there. I eased off the gas and felt that stupid mix of relief and anger. Relief because the pressure was gone, anger because now I looked like the guy who overreacted. I still made the turn and pulled into the station lot. I parked right in front of the doors, nose a little crooked, and sat with the engine running. I stared at the mirror like it might answer me. Nothing. Empty street. I shut the car off and went inside. The desk officer looked up and did that quick scan cops do. Hands, face, posture. I said I needed to report a tale. He asked me to start from when I left work. I told him, downtown bar, shift ended at 3. Dark sedan pulled from our lot and shadowed me. Always 2 car lengths, matched every move, broke off a block from here. He asked for the plate. I didn't have it. Any stickers, dents, busted lights? Number. Make and model? I guessed mid-size, maybe domestic, but I wouldn't bet money. He wrote anyway. He didn't look surprised. He said they could have a cruiser check the alley, but with no plate and no contact. It was mostly a report for the file. He wasn't dismissive. He was practical. He told me to sit tight for a bit and asked if anyone knew I was coming here. I said my roommate did. He nodded and offered water from a cooler that had those little paper cones. I took one to have something to do with my hands. A younger officer came out from a side door and asked to hear it again. I went through it. He said, "We've had a few like that lately. Night shift people. Nobody's been boxed in or approached." He thought maybe it was a crew building routes, or someone testing reactions. Could be nothing. Could be pre-work. "Don't give them a pattern," he said. I said that made sense. He told me to wait 30 minutes and then take a different way home, stay on main corridors, call if the car reappeared. I sat for 30 while the desk phone rang a couple times and some guy wandered in to ask about a towed car. The time felt louder than it was. Marcus texted, "You inside?" I sent him a photo of the lobby clock and he sent back a thumbs up and different route. When the half hour was up, the desk officer signed the report number on a sticky note and slid it to me. "Drive safe," he said. "Watch your mirrors, but don't fixate." Outside, the lot felt staged, like a set where nothing happens. I started the car, took a breath, and backed out slow. I went down Oak the opposite way I came, then cut across to a bigger road with a median. I kept my speed steady and left space. I checked the mirror every minute. No sedan. No anything. At one light, I almost wanted it to show up just so I'd know I wasn't crazy. It didn't. I kept going. Home took twice as long. I passed my block once, circled, then pulled in. Marcus opened the door before I got the key in. Hoodie, socks, phone in hand. He looked me over once and stepped aside. "Sit," he said. We went through it again like we were trying to fix a machine. He said robbery crew. I said maybe someone angry from the bar. We ran through a couple faces from tonight. Guy in the cap who argued over a tab. Woman who said I short-poured. None of them fit. The sedan felt professional. Calm. We ended up with maybes and nothing solid. He told me to crash on the couch if I didn't want to sleep in the room by the window. I said I was fine. I wasn't, but I wanted to be. We set a couple of simple rules. I don't drive home the same way twice. I text him when I'm 5 minutes out, and if anything feels off, I go to the nearest public place and call. I moved the pepper spray from my backpack to the driver's side door pocket. I put 911 on my favorites and kept the phone clipped in the dash mount. I never got an answer. Now I change my route every night, check who pulls out after me, and keep to main roads. I park where I can see the street and leave only when I'm ready, not when someone else gets in their car. I don't chase, I don't test people, and I don't assume it's fine because it was fine the night before. Most nights are boring. Sometimes I catch a pair of headlights hang a little too long in my mirror and my chest tightens, and I remind myself the goal isn't to be brave, it's to get home. When I was 19, I rented a small studio apartment above the Holloway's garage while attending technical college. Mrs. Holloway warned me during the showing that I might hear creaking from the beams, old building she said, and raccoons on the roof sometimes. The rent was cheap enough for a student working waitressing shifts, so I signed the lease without asking too many questions. It was a basic setup: kitchenette, bathroom, main room, and a separate entrance up an outdoor staircase. The first few weeks were normal. I'd come home late from shifts, heat up leftovers, do homework, go to sleep. I kept my head down because I didn't want trouble or attention. I just needed a place I could afford. But after about a month, I started noticing small things. A coffee cup I'd left on the table would be in the sink when I got home. The bathroom window would be cracked open even though I remembered closing it. My textbook would be on a different part of the desk. I figured maybe I was rushing in the mornings and forgetting what I touched. I even told myself raccoons could probably get a window nudged open a little if I hadn't latched it. I bought a little sticky notepad and started leaving myself dumb reminders like locked window and cup on table. The notes made me feel organized, which helped, but they didn't change anything. I'd still come back and something would be a little off. Nothing big, just enough to bother me in that quiet way that sticks in your stomach. I blamed it on exhaustion and my own forgetfulness at first. I was working doubles some weekends and barely sleeping. On nights I closed, I'd get in after midnight, shower, crash, and then be back out the door by 8. Then one night I woke up to a sound from above my head. Not the usual creaking of wood, but rhythmic, like someone slowly shifting their weight from foot to foot. I lay there counting the seconds between the soft thuds. It didn't match wind or branches. I turned on the light and listened. Silence. When I turned the light off, I heard one more shift and then nothing. In the morning, I asked Mr. Holloway if they had storage space in the attic above my apartment. He was friendly like always, a little hard of hearing, and said no. There was technically a gap between my ceiling and the roof, but no way to access it, not even a hatch. He said the house was old and everything made noise. I let it go because arguing felt rude and, honestly, I wanted to believe it was nothing. A week later, I came home in the afternoon, earlier than usual because my shift got canceled. As I climbed the outdoor stairs, I heard a sound from inside. Something like a chair being moved. Not dragged across wood, more of a bump, then the soft clink of something on the counter. I froze on the landing, heart racing. I didn't have a reason to be brave or stupid, so I backed down 2 steps and called Mrs. Holloway on my phone. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said, whispering without meaning to. I think someone might be in my place." She didn't waste time with questions. She said, "Stay there. I'm coming." She came out of the main house and we opened the door together. I kept my phone in my hand like that would help. The apartment was empty, but there was a half-eaten sandwich on my kitchen table, made with my peanut butter. And it definitely wasn't there that morning. The faucet in the sink was dripping. I hadn't left it like that. Mrs. Holloway didn't scold or shrug. She said, "We're calling the police." And I agreed immediately. When the officers arrived, they were calm in that practiced way. One asked if anyone else had a key. I told him just the Holloways and me. The other officer checked the windows and the door frame, said he didn't see pry marks. They did a full check of the apartment, opened cupboards, looked under the bed, even checked the closet behind my coats. I kept saying, "I came home early." Like that explained it, and one of them nodded like it did. Then the taller officer squinted at the bathroom vent. "Do you use this fan?" he asked. I said sure, sometimes. He turned off the bathroom light and said, "Come look." We could see a faint light behind the vent grate, like a glow that didn't belong. He got a screwdriver from the other officer's car. He asked permission, which felt polite, and removed the grate. Behind it wasn't just a ventilation shaft. It was a small passage leading into the space between the roof and ceiling. The air coming out was cooler than the bathroom. The officers exchanged a look I didn't understand, until one of them slid his flashlight inside and said, "There's more back here." That space turned out to be much larger than Mr. Holloway thought. They widened the opening carefully and squeezed through one at a time. I stood with Mrs. Holloway in the doorway, both of us quiet because there wasn't anything useful to say. From inside the dark, the flashlight beams bobbed around. The taller officer said, "Here." Another pause. "And here." Inside, they found a sleeping bag laid out, a flashlight, several plastic water bottles, bags of food, and a stack of my photographs taken through the apartment window at different times of day. Someone had been living there for at least several weeks. They explained it like a routine, which made it worse. The person would come down through the vent when I wasn't home, use my things, eat my food, watch me. The officers said whoever it was had probably timed my shifts, learned when the Holloways were in bed, and slipped back up the second a car turned into the driveway. That night, the police set a small camera in the main room facing the kitchen, and another in the bathroom pointed at the vent. They tucked a voice recorder into the crawl space and told me not to change anything obvious. I stayed at the Holloway's guest room because sleeping under that ceiling wasn't an option anymore. Mr. Holloway said, "We'll sit up with you," and made coffee at 9 like it was a stakeout. We tried to talk about normal things, my classes, his tomato plants, but we kept glancing at the monitor on the table. They waited 2 nights. Nothing. No movement on the cameras, no audio except the building settling and a raccoon that finally did sound like a raccoon. On the morning of the 3rd day, the officers packed up and said the person must have realized they'd been discovered. One of them said, "He'll go quiet for a while." They usually do after a scare. It wasn't comforting, but it sounded true. The police suspected it was a previous tenant who had moved out 2 months before I moved in. He could have made a copy of the key and knew about the crawlspace access. They pulled his old info, but there wasn't an active address for him. "We'll file it," the younger officer said, and he meant it, but I understood they were already out of leads. Mr. Holloway kept saying the house was built in the 1940s and had been modified too many times. He swore he didn't know the passage existed. I believed him. He looked embarrassed, like the building had kept a secret from him. I moved out the next day. I packed what I needed, taped up the rest, and asked the Holloways to store my boxes in their garage until I figured out where I was going. I went to my friend Tasha's place with a duffel and my backpack. She hugged me before I said anything and pointed at the couch. "Stay as long as you want," she said. I stayed a month. I slept in short bursts with the TV on low and a chair wedged under her door, which she didn't comment on. I found another place after that, a basement unit under a quiet couple with a kid. The landlord stood with me and checked every vent, every hatch, every weird panel. He took a screwdriver and showed me the return grills were just shallow space. I needed to see it. I changed my routine too. I stopped posting my schedule in the server's Facebook group and kept it in a paper notebook. I told my manager I couldn't close and open back to back. She didn't ask why, she just adjusted the schedule. The Holloways were horrified. Mrs. Holloway brought over soup to Tasha's place like I was sick and kept apologizing for not knowing our own building. I told her it wasn't their fault. Mr. Holloway hired a contractor and sent me photos while they opened the bathroom wall, traced the vent run, and sealed off the crawl space with metal and foam. He replaced the locks and added a deadbolt to the apartment door. He offered to pay for anything missing. The only things gone were food, 2 socks that didn't match, and a small notebook I used for shift notes. The notebook bothered me. It had my handwriting, my hours, notes like "study after 3." The police took the items from the crawl space, including the photos of me through the window. They bagged them and said evidence, even though we all knew nobody was coming back for it. Before I left, I stood in the bathroom and looked at the new solid wall. No vent, just smooth tile. The quiet felt different, like a blank you could trust. I thanked the Holloways and meant it. Then I left the key on their porch and walked to Tasha's car. Someone had been watching me from above when I slept, listening to my phone conversations, learning my schedule better than I knew it myself. Sometimes at night, I still wake up from creaking sounds and automatically check the ceiling, even though I've lived in a completely different house for almost 10 years now. I know every inch of space above my head in my current place. I checked it myself when I moved in, and my landlord stood there and let me climb a step stool and tap along the drywall until I felt stupid, but calmer. The detective told me cases like mine weren't rare. Old houses with forgotten spaces, people slipping into lives that aren't theirs, until someone notices food missing or a cup in the wrong place. 6 months later, Mrs. Holloway called to say they'd renovated the whole garage structure and sealed every crawl space permanently. She apologized again. I told her it wasn't on them. I just wish I'd trusted the first small things, the cup, the window, the shift in the ceiling, because maybe I would have looked up sooner. So, when I was 19 in 2015, I was in college and working part-time at a 24-hour self-service laundromat near campus. My shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. on weekends. After midnight, there was almost nobody. I kept order, cleared lint, unjammed coin slots, and called repair if something died. No security, just me and a camera above the entrance. That Saturday in early December was especially very quiet. Around 1 a.m., a woman about 30 came in with a big bag of laundry. She loaded 3 machines, paid with tokens, and sat by the window scrolling. I wiped the folding table. Nothing about her stood out. The street outside was empty. I went back to the counter, checked the monitor, and tried to focus on my notes. I still had that alert, floaty feeling you get on night shift. About half an hour later, she came to the counter and asked to change a 20 for dryer tokens. I opened the register and started counting when she suddenly asked, "Do you work here alone?" It wasn't hostile, but it landed wrong. I said yes, nights were solo. She nodded, took the tokens, and went back. When her washers finished, she moved her clothes to 3 dryers and then went outside instead of waiting. Through the window, I watched her pace with her phone to her ear. You could read the body language, explaining, listening, pushing back. When she came in again, she sat in the same chair, but she stopped scrolling. Her eyes kept going to the door. I mentally counted what was in the till, about 80 in bills and a lot of tokens. The dryers ticked down. The woman kept glancing at the entrance like she was waiting on a signal. I tucked my phone into my back pocket with 9-1 typed. Another 20 minutes and the door opened. 2 men walked in, one tall and thin, the other shorter and stockier. No laundry. They stopped at the soda machine. The woman stood up fast and went to them. They talked quietly with their heads close. Every few seconds, one of them looked at me. I pretended to check a lint trap and dropped 2 tokens because my hands were sweaty. The tall guy peeled off and came to the counter. "Got change for 100?" he said, unfolding a bill. I didn't touch it. "Tokens only," I said. "Store policy." He smirked. "You sure?" "Check the register again." I kept my voice even. "It's mostly tokens and a few bills for refunds." He leaned on the counter. I opened the drawer because refusing to look would escalate it. I tilted it so he could see. "That's what I've got." He didn't look at the money. His eyes went to the camera sign, then back to his friends. The stocky one shook his head. The woman stared at the dryers like she wasn't part of it. "Slow night?" the tall guy asked. I nodded. He said the vending machine ate his dollar. I said I could help if he showed me which one. He didn't move. He lowered his voice. "Easier if you hand me the bills, sweetheart. Save us the back and forth." My mouth went dry. I kept my hands on the drawer's edge. "Can't," I said. "There's a camera." I pointed up. He didn't look. He sighed. Behind him, the stocky one adjusted his jacket. The woman shifted by the shelves. I felt my phone in my pocket. If I hit the last one and said the address, that might be enough. The staff door to the office was behind my left leg. If I was fast, I could step back and kick it shut. But the tall guy was within reach of the drawer, and if he yanked it, my hand could get trapped. I chose stillness. "If there's a problem, I can call my manager," I said. He tilted his head. "Call whoever you want." His eyes went flat. He looked at the other 2 and gave the smallest nod. The woman took 1 step sideways, reached up, grabbed a bottle of laundry detergent from the shelf and threw it at the window. The glass cracked but didn't break. I flinched back from the counter and my hand already had my phone. I hit call and said 911 out loud like it would make it connect faster. "Emergency, what's—" I cut in, loud. "I'm at the laundromat on Maple by campus. 3 people are trying to rob me. Please send police." The stocky guy rushed to the door and planted himself there like he was going to keep me from running. But I wasn't running. I ducked behind the counter and yanked the little rolling chair in as a wedge. "I'm on the phone with the police," I yelled. I gave the address again, spelled the street. The dispatcher's voice stayed calm. "Units are 3 minutes out. Can you secure yourself?" I said I was behind the counter and there was a camera, and I kept my voice high on purpose so they heard. They all froze for a second. The tall one looked at the woman like he'd misjudged the timing. He muttered something I didn't catch. I kept saying, "Police are coming." "I'm on the line." He took 2 steps back. The dispatcher asked for descriptions and I rattled them off. Height, jacket colors, their ages, my eyes on their hands. The stocky one tried the door like he was thinking about flipping the lock, then didn't. The tall one said, "Let's go." Low and tight, like it was a correction. They started for the exit. The woman moved last. On the way, she reached over to 2 of my washing machines, yanked the hoses, and water blasted onto the floor like she'd practiced it. I swore without meaning to. She didn't look at me. Then all 3 were outside. Through the glass, I finally saw the dark sedan backed into the far spot. I'd missed it when she first came in. They piled in. The engine jumped. The dispatcher asked if they'd left and I said yes, heading east, and she told me to stay on the line. 2 minutes later, maybe less, time was weird. Blue lights hit the windows. The first officer stepped in slow, palm out, taking in the water and the cracked pane. I handed over the phone and then the DVR remote with shaking fingers. "Faces are on this," I said. We watched the clip together. It was grainy and the angle was high, but you could see the tall guy's jawline, the woman's ponytail, the stocky one's jacket logo. "We can work with it," he said. Another officer took my statement again, cleaner this time. They took photos of the crack, the spilled detergent on the floor, the hoses. When they finally left, the place looked like an aftermath photo. I stayed behind the counter until my manager answered his phone and said he was on his way. The police told me later they recognized the woman as soon as they saw the clip. Teresa Mills. Local, lots of contacts, picked up before for shoplifting and small stuff. They didn't have a name for the men. The investigator, the one who came back the next day, walked me through what he called a routine setup. Woman comes in first, chats, finds out if I'm alone, clocks the camera in the drawer, then calls in the guys to either scare me into handing over bills or grab and run. The glass hit was a distraction. The hoses were covered. He said they liked easy wins and fast exits. A week later, they picked up Teresa on a traffic stop. That's how he said it, like it was nothing. But then he told me they got a warrant and found drugs and a stack of stolen credit cards at her place. She rolled right away. Her boyfriend and his brother were the men with her, and both had records. Nothing huge but constant. They were picked up the next day. I went in to sign an updated statement and watched a cleaner copy of the footage while the investigator pointed to timestamps. He asked if I wanted court updates. I said no at first, and then changed my mind. I hated not knowing the end of things. I quit nights that week. My boss said he understood, and he did. He upgraded the cameras to better ones and hired a security guard for weekends. Everyone told me that should make me feel safer, and it did on paper, but it didn't fix how my body reacted to the beep of the door or someone standing too long at the shelves. I kept thinking about how fast it all happened, how she softened me with small talk, how I handed over information without meaning to when I said I was alone. I keep replaying that moment where she asked and I answered, and wondering if sounding more official or less friendly would have shifted their decision sooner. The investigator called me a month later and said they'd tied the same trio to 2 other late-night hits that month. Same pattern. Woman scouts, guys follow. Hearing that didn't make me feel better. It just confirmed that I wasn't special. I was routine. It happened when I was 16, during my junior year in this small town in Oregon. For most of the year, we had Miss Anderson teaching us history. She was older, strict, and somehow kind. She took leave for family reasons, and we all signed a card. Then Mr. Riley showed up. Early 20s, fresh out of college, trendy sneakers, a hoodie over a button-down, the whole cool teacher thing. He joked a lot, tossed candy for right answers, and tried to make wars and treaties sound like sitcom drama. People liked him. A lot of the girls talked about him after school. He did this easy smile, leaned against desks, made everyone feel like he was just another student who happened to know the test answers. He set up a history club after school, which sounded nerdy, but was honestly fun. We watched documentaries, argued over events, tried to guess exam questions. About 10 of us showed up regularly, me and my friend Thomas almost always. It was relaxed, low stakes, but I noticed things I couldn't unsee once they clicked. Riley's gaze stuck too long on certain students, mostly the girls who sat up front. And every so often he'd throw out a comment about someone's hair being magazine ready, or joke that a skirt was dangerous in the Renaissance. Everyone laughed because that's what people do when they're not sure. I told myself I was reading into it, but the pattern didn't go away. One afternoon, he handed out club permission slips for a weekend museum trip that never actually happened. He hovered while a few of the girls signed. When Emily asked a normal question about bus times, he laughed and said, "You're so organized. Exactly what I need." It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Thomas nudged me later and said, "He flirts like he thinks it's invisible." I shrugged. I didn't want to be the guy making it weird. But it was weird. 2 weeks later, during a club meeting, we watched a World War II documentary. He dimmed the room except for the glow from the projector. About halfway through, the class lights popped on from the hallway motion sensor. Thomas got up to hit the wall switch in the corner by the tall bookshelf. The switch was slightly behind a stack of books shoved onto the top shelf, the kind that never get touched. Year-old workbooks, a beat-up atlas. He reached, the stack shifted, and the whole top layer slid down. Books thumped across the floor, and with them, a small black thing bounced, spun, and rolled under the front row. Thomas bent, picked it up, and held it between 2 fingers. It was a tiny camera, the kind you stick somewhere and forget. There was a square of sticky tape on the back, fuzz and dust stuck to the edges. On the little screen you could see saved video files. He tapped, and the timestamp list popped up like a phone gallery. A few of us stood to look. Mr. Riley had been standing by the window, arms folded, doing that casual silhouette pose teachers think looks smart. When Thomas said, Riley turned, saw the camera, and moved fast. His face lost all color. He crossed the room quick and said too loud, "Give that here, please." Not a question. His hand was out, fingers stiff. Thomas stepped back, held the camera up above his head like it was a basketball he didn't want stolen. "Why is there a hidden camera in the classroom?" His voice cracked a little. He wasn't being dramatic. It was a normal question said in a normal way, and that's what made it hit. "That's my personal property for recording my notes," Riley said. The words came clipped. No smile, no jokes. "Hand it back immediately." He took another step. I noticed his jaw working. He wasn't joking anymore. Someone to my left said, "Notes of what?" And someone else said, "Dude." The room didn't feel like a club anymore. It felt like a place where something bad had been happening without us seeing it. "Stop messing around," he snapped. "This is school equipment I was testing. Give it to me. Now." The shift in his voice, sharp, not the friendly tone, made everyone freeze. Thomas didn't move. He just said, "Then why is there sticky tape on the back?" He wasn't trying to be clever. He held the thing flat so everyone could see the tape. Emily stood up and pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the principal," she said. She had that shaky calm people get when they've decided what they're doing. "This isn't right." Riley closed the distance to her in 2 fast strides and reached for her phone. It wasn't some big dramatic lunge, more like a grab he wanted to look casual. But we all saw it. "Don't," he said low. "Put the phone away." I moved without thinking. Me and 2 other guys stepped between them. It wasn't heroic. It was automatic. He wasn't our friend in that moment. He was a man trying to take a girl's phone. Up close I could see sweat beading at his hairline. He looked at us like we'd broken a rule he thought we didn't know about. "Move," he said. His eyes darted to the door, then to Thomas's hand, then to Emily's phone, back to the door. For a second I thought he might try to push through us. He didn't. He turned, grabbed his bag from his desk with this practiced sweep, and headed for the door. No one followed. No one said anything clever. We just listened to him go. His footsteps pounded down the hallway, fast at first, then fading. and then a door slammed at the exit. We stood in shock for a few seconds, nobody moving or breathing loud. Then Thomas thumbed the power and the screen lit up. The file list was long, like endless. He tapped one at random. It was our class from last week, shot from near the clock. At first it looked normal. Kids taking notes, Riley pacing, the usual. Then the frame shifted to the front row and just stayed. When a girl leaned over her desk, the camera stayed on her. When she shifted in her chair, it zoomed or the angle changed a little, like it had been moved earlier to get that view. Thomas scrolled. Same day, different angle. Another file. Now it was from the side wall. Same focus. A couple of girls, their desks, their bodies. Someone swore under their breath. Emily said, "We have to take this to the office right now." We didn't argue. We didn't keep watching. We walked out in a tight clump and went straight to the principal's office, but it was late, so the assistant principal was on duty. He looked bored for 1 second, then Thomas put the camera in his hand and told him exactly where we found it. The man's face changed fast. He asked, "Is he still here?" We told him Riley had run. He buzzed the front desk, told them to lock the main doors, and then told us to sit while he called the police. He also started calling parents. Mine picked up on speaker. I heard my mom say she was on her way. 2 officers showed up in minutes. They didn't mess around. One of them plugged the camera into the office computer. The folders were sorted by dates. 3 months worth, starting right when Riley took over the class. They clicked through and kept notes. A lot of the clips were exactly like what we saw, framed on specific girls when they leaned forward or crossed their legs. Then, one officer opened a folder marked with a weird short name, and everything inside looked edited, slowed down, cropped. It made the room go quiet again except for the sound of the mouse. The assistant principal kept saying, "Okay, okay." He didn't mean it like it was okay. He meant he was trying to keep it together. Parents arrived one after another. My mom hugged me too tight and asked, "Are you in any of these?" I said I didn't know. Emily was shaking and whispering to her friend. Thomas had his arms crossed so hard his knuckles were white. The officers told us we'd need to write statements and that they were going to secure Riley's classroom and his desk. The assistant principal called the principal at home and then the district. It stopped feeling like school. It felt like a building where something criminal had been happening and we just stumbled into it. Thomas's parents filed a police report, and Mr. Riley was arrested 2 days later at a motel in a neighboring state. It was at the edge of town over the border, nothing fancy. They said he checked in under his own name like he didn't think he'd made it that far yet. He was charged with producing illegal content involving minors and violating privacy. After that, it moved in steps. He was transferred back, arraigned, then his lawyer tried to get some of the files tossed. It didn't go anywhere. He was tried and got several years in prison. The sentence wasn't a life sentence, but it wasn't a slap on the wrist either. People in town stopped saying his name out loud. The school hired a crisis counselor to work with students who'd been recorded, especially the girls who felt violated and betrayed. There were group sessions and one-on-ones. Some kids went, some didn't. Many of the girls refused to go back into that classroom at all. The administration didn't argue. They moved history to a different room for the rest of the year, and then repainted and shuffled everything over the summer. The desk layout changed. The bookshelves got bolted differently. They said it was standard procedure, which sounded like PR, but I understood why they said it that way. It took me several weeks to understand the full seriousness of it. At first, it felt like a TV plot I'd watched and could pause and walk away from, but then it kept showing up in my head at random. How he'd grin, how easy he was with us, how we laughed at the same jokes. A person we trusted, a person some of us liked, used that to turn us into content. Thomas told me he couldn't shake the feeling that he should have spotted it earlier. I told him I felt the same. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. How he insisted the desks be angled a certain way for discussion. How often he asked specific girls to stay after for extra help. How he always had a reason to take class photos for the school newspaper when no one from the newspaper ever showed up. How he'd nudge someone to sit in a particular seat for the projector. None of it sounded evil on its own. Together it was a system, planned and tested, and we were in it without knowing. I used to work as a night janitor in this 28-story office building in the financial district. 6 years on graveyards will mess with your head a little, but the pay was good, and the routine kept me steady. I knew the place like my own apartment. What doors stuck, which printers ran hot, which elevators thunked on level off. It was quiet most nights. Good quiet. Then one night on the 27th floor, while I was mopping the hallway outside a cluster of conference rooms, I caught this sharp chemical smell coming out of a wall vent. Not bathroom cleaner, not paint, not ozone. Different. The filtration in that building was always perfect. I even joked that the air upstairs was better than street air. This wasn't that. I stood there, mop dripping, telling myself it was someone's aerosol or a spilled solvent. But the smell kept coming. So I set the mop in the bucket, grabbed my screwdriver from the cart, and took the vent cover off. I told myself I'd just clear a wrapper or wipe a spill and be done. I clicked my flashlight on and leaned in. The duct didn't only run vertical like it should. It jogged sideways, like a sleeve to nowhere, toward a section that, as far as the floor plan and my feet knew, was just empty structure. That was wrong. The smell was stronger inside, sharp enough to sting a little. I thought about calling engineering. The overnight guy hated being woken up. He'd make it my problem anyway. And then thought about building security. They'd say, write a log and we'll review the cameras. I pulled the light back, put the cover on, and stood there with that prickle you get when something doesn't line up. I told myself I'd circle back, but I didn't feel right leaving it. I took the service stairs, not the guest ones, up to the 28th. Technically, it's the roof level, but the door says mechanical. Only the engineers and me had access for monthly deep cleaning. You had your big air handlers, chillers, breaker panels, all that constant hum. I followed the wall that sat above the weird duct like I was tracing it on graph paper. When you work nights, you start doing little mental maps to keep yourself awake. Based on where that hallway vent sat, the duct should have pointed somewhere along the far east wall. That section was cluttered with old fan housings, cracked fiberglass duct pieces, and a pallet of filters someone never logged. I pulled the cart along and moved the smaller stuff by hand. Behind a tilt of 2 dead fan units, I found a narrow steel door. No sign, no number. Just a standard hasp and a regular hardware store padlock. I remember saying, "Huh," out loud, and then looking around like someone would answer me. I went back to my cart, slid the tray up, and pulled out the bolt cutters. Every janitor who's worked more than a year has them for tangled cable locks on donated chairs, idiots chaining the trash room, that kind of petty stuff. I hesitated. Padlocks means someone put the door there for a reason. But this was inside a restricted floor that I clean, and the smell wasn't going away. I set the bolt cutters on the hasp and squeezed. The lock popped easier than I expected, cheap metal. I pocketed the broken shackle without thinking and pulled the door open. The room behind it was cramped, maybe 10 by 12, unlit except for what my flashlight gave me. No shelves, no tags, just black garbage bags, a whole stack of them, all tied tight. The air in there was stale and had that same chemical edge. My first dumb thought was, okay, someone's been lazy with e-waste, which isn't allowed. Then I noticed how the bags weren't just thrown in. They were packed in rows like someone cared about using the space. I put on the nitrile gloves from my cart out of habit. Old cut risk lecture drilled into me, and tugged one of the bags toward the door so I could see what I was doing. It was heavier than it looked. I ripped the knot with a box cutter and opened it just enough to look. Laptops, stacks of them. Different brands, different sizes. No power cords. I counted by sight, at least 10 in that first bag. I remember this weird mix of relief and dread. Relief it wasn't something hazardous. Dread because this wasn't normal housekeeping. I opened another bag. Tablets, mostly. Some older, some new. A third bag had smartphones, some with cases, some without. A handful of cameras wedged along the side, and a couple of smartwatches in bubble wrap. I started noticing stickers. A blue asset tag from a marketing agency on 24. A barcode I recognized from an insurance company on 16. I took a breath, reached back into the first bag, and pulled one laptop farther out into the light. On the bottom, near the hinge, was an engraving. Clean, machine done. It had the firm's name from the 12th floor, a serial number, and property of in all caps. No disposed sticker, no scratch out, not auctioned, not recycled. I checked the ports and keyboards. Most of the stuff wasn't older than 3 years. USB-C everywhere, current logos, last year's phone shapes. Nothing beat up like surplus. Everything looked like it had been taken out of service fast, or not taken out of service at all. I stood there with my flashlight bouncing off the bags, thinking through the obvious possibilities and the stupid ones. A tenant storage mix-up? No, tenants don't have access up here. Engineering storing found items? No, engineering logs everything because they panic about audits. A police sting? No way. They'd never use a random mechanical closet and a $5 lock. I looked back at the cut padlock in my pocket, and then at the neat rows of trash bags, all identical. Whoever set this up had time. They had privacy. They had a reason to keep everything close and quiet. I opened one more bag to be sure I wasn't building a story in my head. More devices. Phones with etched ID numbers. A camera with a strap embroidered with a company name from 19. A tablet still in a case that had a family photo tucked in the pocket. 2 kids at a winter fair. I put it back in the bag and tightened the drawstring because I suddenly hated the idea of their faces sitting out in my flashlight beam. I kept my gloves on and wiped the door frame with a rag out of reflex, which felt ridiculous in the moment. Like I was the one doing something wrong. I didn't take anything. I didn't touch more than I had to. I just stood there cataloging what I could see and what it meant. This wasn't lost and found. It was a stash. And it was carefully hidden by someone who had access to the technical floor. I stepped back from the door and called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring even though it was late. I kept it simple. You need to come to the 28th. There's a room behind the fans, bags full of devices. He didn't crack a joke or ask if I was messing with him. He said, "Stay put. Don't touch anything else." 20 minutes later, he walked off the service stairs a little out of breath. I led him behind the fan units and opened the door enough to hit the bags with my flashlight. He looked once, then twice, then went pale in a way I'd never seen on him. "Close it," he said. "Close it right now." We stood in the walkway by the air handlers and talked low, like volume mattered here. He said, "We need to call the police," and then added, "Don't tell anyone else until morning. Not security, not tenants. This is going to involve building management, and if this gets out wrong, it'll be chaos." I said, "What if whoever did this comes back?" He looked at the cheap lock pieces in my hand and said, "We'll block the door with equipment. I'll write it in the maintenance log as unit staging so nobody moves it." It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. We slid 2 dead fan housings in front of the narrow door and pushed a pallet of filters against them. He took photos on his phone and told me to clock out on time and go home. Morning came fast. Marcus called me before my usual bedtime and told me to come back and meet the police. 2 uniforms and a detective in a blazer were already waiting at the freight elevator. We went up together. Marcus showed them the path, then we moved the junk away, and I opened the door. The detective told me to step back and not touch anything. They started a methodical sweep. Photos, evidence numbers, the whole process. An officer read serials off a few laptops while the other one bagged them. They treated it like a burglary scene, which I guess is exactly what it was, just delayed. I answered basic questions: how I found it, who has access to the floor, who had keys. Marcus did the same, quieter than usual. The detective pulled me aside and asked if I'd ever met the former systems administrator. I said I remembered a guy from IT who used to float around late at night, tall, shaved head, wore those tactical boots. Could have been him. The detective nodded like that matched something. He said, "We're looking at a former sysadmin fired last year for violations. He had access to every floor and a badge that let him into suites. It wouldn't be hard for him to show up and say he was doing a tech support sweep, grab a laptop while re-imaging it, that kind of thing." It made sense in a practical way that made my skin crawl. The detective added that the stash spot told them he'd done this over time, not once. They took everything, every bag, logged it, and left the room empty. I asked if we should change locks or something more serious. He said, "That's for management." Weeks went by. Then months. I kept waiting for an email or a meeting. Instead, I got a hallway conversation with building management. "Please don't discuss what you found. Tenants are already nervous about unrelated stuff. Our reputation matters." It was said like a request, but felt like a warning. I told them the police already had it all. I didn't have details to share anyway. They smiled and said thanks, and that was that. After 3 months, I asked Marcus if he'd heard anything. He shrugged in that tired way and said, "They're still investigating." Around that time, I heard from a porter who had a friend on security that the former sysadmin didn't show up at his old address when someone went by. I didn't want rumor, so I called the detective, left a message, and actually got a call back. He said the guy's apartment was empty, cleaned out, phone disconnected, no forwarding. "It happens," he said. "People bounce." He didn't sound optimistic. I wasn't sure if that meant they were stuck or if they were close and just not telling me. I tried to stay out of it. I did my rounds. I kept my head down. But walking past that vent on 27 made me feel like I'd swallowed batteries. I started checking locks more than I needed to. I watched for strangers on cameras even though that wasn't my job. The whole thing shifted how the building felt. Not haunted, just compromised. Like the routines we all leaned on were a thin cover for whoever had the patience to work around them. After one night where a tenant accused me of moving her keyboard, I hadn't. I decided I was done. I turned in my badge and keys, gave Marcus 2 weeks, and left before my last Friday. I told him I liked him but not the building, which was the truth. Sometimes I still wonder if they ever caught the guy, or if he's doing the same thing in some other tower with a different night crew and a different Marcus. The whole thing shoved a lesson in my face. Places that look normal and professional can hide a lot, and the people in charge will often choose quiet over fixing the rot. So, when I was 17 and still in high school, I wasn't really into climbing around falling apart buildings. But when Madison mentioned she was going urban exploring with some people, I volunteered immediately. I'd liked Madison all through junior year. She ran cross-country, she was smarter than me by a mile, and she laughed in a way that made you feel like you'd said something actually funny. Her friend Brandon had set up a trip to this closed place, Rocky Mountain Auto, out by the industrial edge of town. Friday night, we met at Brandon's. Him, his younger brother Kyle, Madison's friends Tessa and Zoe, and me. Brandon had an old Honda with duct tape holding the mirror. We crammed in and drove out there with the windows cracked because the car always smelled like gas. The shop had been shut 4 years, big block of concrete with 2 stories and a long garage. I wore old jeans and beat-up sneakers, shoved my untied laces down into the shoes, and told myself I'd fix them when we got inside. We parked a block away and cut across a weedy lot. The chain-link fence was half collapsed behind the building. Brandon pulled it up with a grunt, and we slid under. Kyle had a chunky flashlight like a cop carries. Brandon had one too, plus a backpack with gloves and pry bars. I had my phone light and a pocket knife I never used. Madison asked if I wanted her spare gloves. I told her I was fine. Stupid pride. And shoved my cold hands in my hoodie. Inside, the air hit me. Old oil and mildew. There were cars still on the lifts, dust thick on windshields, a couple with windows smashed. Someone joked about tetanus. Tessa rattled a red toolbox and said, "Dude, these wrenches are like $200. Kyle shouted that he'd found an office with a safe bolted to the floor. We kept moving deeper, and I felt the first real wrong note. Not like ghosts or whatever, just like we were stepping into someone else's problem. The far bay was partitioned with a plywood wall that didn't reach the ceiling. We ducked around it and found 3 cars under gray covers. Brandon pulled one cover off and whistled. SUVs. Not new, but not dead either. One still had plates. There were paper floor mats like from a dealership. Madison's face changed a little, like a switch flipped. She looked toward the big doors, listening. Brandon said, low, "This looks like a drop. Like they stashed them here." Zoe asked if we should leave, already backing up. Brandon did that confident shrug guys do when they don't want to spook anyone. "We're just looking." I ran my phone light across the concrete and saw recent tire dust, like arcs where someone turned. That feeling in my gut got louder. It wasn't adventure anymore. It was, we're going to stumble over somebody's business. Kyle, being Kyle, wanted to see the upstairs storage. 10 minutes, he said. Then we bounce. He was already halfway to the metal stairs along the wall, stepping light. The staircase groaned, but not dangerously, just loud enough to make you clench. We went up single file. Kyle first, then Brandon, then Madison and me, with Tessa and Zoe behind us whispering about how creepy offices felt at night. The second floor was a grid of shelving with cardboard boxes, brake rotors in plastic, bins of random hardware, everything filmed in dust. My sneakers whispered on grit. Madison fell in next to me and asked about our chem exam, and I actually unclenched a little. I told her I'd probably pass if I didn't mess up the stoichiometry problems. She laughed and bumped my shoulder with hers. For a minute, it felt normal, like we were just killing time somewhere we shouldn't be. Then Brandon yelled, "Guys!" Over here, his voice wasn't jokey. It carried. We threaded through shelves to a corner office build-out with a flimsy door. Inside was a room someone had made into a sleep space. 2 stained mattresses on pallets, a crate used as a table, water jugs, a camp stove with a blackened pot, and a pile of clothes. There were fast food bags, still crisp like they hadn't been sitting forever. A little mirror was taped to the wall with a comb stuck to it by hair. Madison said very quiet, "Someone lives here." Zoe's hand found Tessa's sleeve and squeezed. Brandon muttered, "Okay, we're leaving," and reached to pull the door shut again, like that would undo what we'd seen. I turned to go, not watching my feet because my eyes were on Madison's face, and my stupid loose lace worked its way out and looped under my other shoe. It snagged. I pitched forward. I tried to catch myself with both hands, and my right palm hit a strip of rusted metal sticking out from the edge of a shelf, like a torn-off bracket. The edge bit in. It was so fast I didn't have time to swear. Just a white flash and heat. I yanked my hand back on reflex, and the pain spiked up my arm. I heard someone say my name. Madison, I think. And Brandon say, "Don't move. Don't move." Blood ran off my palm in a thin sheet and spattered the concrete. I squeezed my wrist and it still poured. The cut was deep and ugly, not clean at all, maybe 3 inches long, with the skin ragged like it had been chewed. When I opened my fingers to look, the edges of the wound were dirty from rust. I squeezed my hand into a fist, trying to stop the blood, but it flowed between my fingers, dripped on the floor. Madison ran over first, grabbed my wrist, yelled for Zoe to bring something for bandaging. Zoe ripped off her bandana and pressed it into my palm. We wrapped the hand, but the fabric soaked through almost instantly and went warm and slick. Brandon said, tight voice, that we needed to bail and get to a hospital. This was serious. Kyle was already sweeping the flashlights back and forth, checking the path to the stairs. We started moving. Me with my hand raised like Madison showed me, elbow high, the pulse thudding in my palm each time my heart kicked. My head felt light from the pain and from watching the blood. I tried to look at the floor and count steps. On the first floor near the exit, we heard voices outside and saw headlight beams swing across the bay doors. A car had pulled up close. Doors slammed. Footsteps. Someone was walking toward the entrance with that no-hurry confidence that made everything worse. Brandon swore under his breath and said it might be security or the owners of those SUVs, and we needed another way out, right now. We turned and ran the opposite direction, through a side hallway lined with old posters and parts catalogs. Kyle forced open a storage room and we jammed in. There was a high window with wire mesh half rusted through. Brandon pointed. Kyle took the crowbar from his pack, climbed onto a crate, and smashed the glass out with 2 heavy hits. The sound was sharp and too loud, but outside was only wind and weeds and the distant hum of the street. He knocked the shards off the frame with the bar, then used the crowbar to pry the wire mesh until it tore loose. We went in order. Kyle slipped out first, then Brandon, then Madison. Zoe boosted Tessa. I could hear voices back near the entrance now, a man and another voice answering, and the grind of the main door being tugged. I kept my hand up, tried not to breathe so hard. "Your turn," Madison said from outside, reaching. I nodded and moved to the window. I went through second to last. My bloody hand slipped on the frame, pain exploded in a new wave, and I almost fell. But Brandon caught me from outside by the back of my hoodie and hauled me onto the weeds. Zoe came behind me and slid out like a seal, and then we were running through the overgrowth to the fence. My shoes grabbed at vines and my lace tried to tangle again. I kicked free and kept moving. We climbed over where the chain link leaned. The metal bit into my jeans and my good hand burned from grabbing hard. But we got down on the far side and crouched for a second, listening. Nothing chased. No one shouted. Brandon said, "Go." And we went. We reached the car parked a block away. Brandon started the engine with shaking hands and pulled out slow, then faster. Madison sat with me in the back, held my hand wrapped in her jacket now over the bandana, and told me to breathe steady in through the nose, out through the mouth. I focused on her voice and the rhythm because the pain kept trying to take over. Kyle kept watch out the rear window and said he didn't see any headlights following. At the ER, the triage nurse took one look and walked me straight through. She removed the makeshift bandage and made a face that she tried to hide. The wound looked terrible, deep and dirty, edges uneven, rust ground into the skin. The doctor came quick, flushed the wound again and again until the water ran mostly clear, then numbed it and put in 15 stitches, slow, careful passes. I got a tetanus shot and antibiotics, and a lecture about old metal and infections. He said I was lucky because infection could have set in fast. My parents arrived 30 minutes after the hospital called. My dad was furious in that clipped way where he says your name and nothing else for a second, and my mom cried and kept smoothing my hair off my forehead. I got reamed out completely, and I didn't argue because I couldn't. The next week I took the antibiotics and went for dressing changes. My hand hurt like hell, and I couldn't use it right. Even tying my shoes felt like a project. Madison visited me a couple times, brought notes from class, and we talked a lot about everything and also nothing. Somehow it just happened that we started dating after the stitches came out. I found someone else's hair in the bathtub drain, dark, almost black, even though I'd been blonde for 5 years. It was about 2 weeks after I moved into the 4th floor walk-up in an old brick building downtown. The divorce happened fast and messy, and I needed a place without thinking too hard. So when the realtor showed me the 2-bed with high ceilings and big windows, I said yes on the spot. She was a nervous woman in her 40s who kept answering calls during the showing, talking in half-whispers about other listings, and mentioned the previous tenant leaving before the lease ended. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which means most days I'm at home, bouncing between Illustrator, invoices, and coffee. I blame the hair on lazy cleaning. Then the little things started. My toothbrush was on the wrong side of the sink. The toothpaste cap was off, though I'm careful about screwing it back on because it cracks if you force it. The bath towel was on the other hook, like someone had just wiped their hands. I told myself stress makes people forgetful. I was forgetting everything lately. Passwords, where I'd put my stylus, what I'd said to my ex on that last call. I tried to get organized, thinking routine would settle me. I kept mugs in one cabinet, plates in another, and set my keys on a little dish by the door each night. I made a rule to run the vacuum on Fridays, partly because the neighbor below complained about random thumps, and I wanted to control what I could. A couple of times I found the living room window latch angled down when I was sure I'd left it flat. Old buildings do that, I told myself. Things stick. Things drift. I adjusted the latch to flat again and pressed it hard, feeling the metal bite. The next morning, it was angled down. I stared at it for a long minute, then shrugged it off and opened my laptop, because deadlines don't care if you're uneasy. About 3 weeks in, I noticed the milk dropping faster than it should. I hadn't touched it in 2 days, but the line on the carton had sunk. I stood there with the fridge open, feeling the motor hum, and tried to do the math. Maybe I'd made a late-night latte and forgot? Maybe not. It was small, but it nagged. Then I saw the eggs. There were 5. I remembered 8. I started keeping a mental list. Milk line here, eggs like this, cheese sealed. With the stupid confidence that counting would prove I wasn't losing it. I was buried in a big project with a brutal deadline, and I'd been falling asleep at my desk around 2 a.m., waking with a keyboard imprint on my wrist. Maybe I wasn't remembering basic stuff. Then one morning I walked into the bathroom and caught a faint hit of men's deodorant. Not cologne, not my shampoo. That chalky clean smell I associate with gym lockers. I froze in the doorway and said out loud, "Nope." I checked the shower curtain, the cabinet, even the tiny gap behind the toilet where dust bunnies go to die. Empty, obviously. Still, the smell clung to the air like a bad joke. I started doing small, boring tests. I took a picture of the open fridge every night on my phone so I could line up the shelves and see what moved. I put the toothbrush perpendicular to the sink's edge, bristles pointing at the faucet, and snapped another picture. I rubber banded the toothpaste cap, not tight, just enough that if someone twisted it off, the band would shift. I shut the window, angled the latch flat, and stuck a tiny piece of painter's tape beside it, so I'd see a tear if it moved. None of this felt paranoid to me. It felt like QA testing my own life. I swapped the door chain for a new one and asked the building manager if the locks had been rekeyed when the previous tenant left. He said, "They always are," in that tone landlords have when you sound like trouble. I ordered a door wedge and a new deadbolt anyway. When the packages came, I installed them between calls, then texted a friend, "Living alone has me acting like a grandma." She sent back, "Grandmas survive." Wednesday, around 3, things snapped into focus. I had a client meeting across town, but an hour before, he texted to cancel, said he was sick, sorry. I walked home early because it was nice to beat my own schedule for once. Usually I work until 6, sometimes later, then do a loop around the block to unkink my back. That day, I climbed the last flight of stairs to my floor, and halfway down the hall, heard water running. Not pipe noise, not a radiator. The steady hiss of my shower. My heart jumped. I stopped outside my door and stood there with the keys pinched in my hand, listening. The sound was clear. Too clear to gaslight myself into a maybe. It was my bathroom, my shower, running like someone had stepped in. I tried to think of an innocent reason. A leak, maybe? But a leak doesn't turn knobs. This was a smooth, even flow. No pointy bursts, no gurgle. I put my ear to the door and felt that mild, damp heat that seeps under thresholds. My first thought was 911. My second thought was that if I called and it turned out to be a plumbing issue, I'd look ridiculous. I pulled my phone out, thumb hovering, and told myself I could open, see nothing, then call the super instead. I slid the chain off, set the door wedge in my pocket without knowing why, and eased the key toward the lock. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." I slid the key in, felt the pins align, and turned. The water in the bathroom cut off in an instant, like whoever was inside had just heard the sound of my key. I pushed the door and froze in the entry. 3 seconds later, the bathroom door flew open and a guy about 20 burst out, wet black hair, wrapped in my big gray towel. Thin, pale, eyes wide. We stared. My throat wouldn't work. He clutched the towel and swallowed hard. Then he moved. He cut for the front door, snatching from the living room chair as he passed. Jeans, a t-shirt, a backpack. I flattened to the wall and let him through because I had no plan except not to get grabbed. He yanked the door open and bolted into the hall, still in my towel. The stairwell door slammed. I heard bare feet slapping down the steps, fast, fading. Only then did I move. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The dispatcher took my address and asked if he was armed. I said I hadn't seen a weapon. She told me to stay outside if I could. I said he was gone. She kept me on the line until units were close. I stood in the doorway and listened for any sound inside. Nothing. Waiting in the hall felt worse than being in my own place, so I stepped in, went straight to the kitchen, and pulled the biggest knife from the block. I did a fast sweep. Bedroom, closet, under the bed, second room, bathroom. Empty. The shower walls were wet. There was a damp footprint on the mat, not mine. The police arrived 12 minutes later. 2 officers, one older, one younger. I put the knife on the counter, palms open, and said I wasn't hurt. They did their own search, slower and careful. They opened every closet, checked behind curtains, moved my office chair, and looked under the desk, pulled the shower curtain back again like someone might materialize. Then they stepped onto the small balcony. "Here," the older one said. The window latch was cracked. You could pry it from outside if you leaned on it. The balcony feeds into the fire escape that runs along the building. Easy in from above or below, especially midday when people are at work. In the entry closet, behind my coats, they found a backpack shoved deep in the corner. Inside were rolled t-shirts, socks, boxers, instant noodles, a toothbrush, a disposable razor. On the floor beside it, a sleeping bag, neatly rolled and strapped. The younger officer said, "He's been camping here." The older one called it squatting, slipping in off the fire escape and using the apartment when I was out. He asked if I'd noticed anything off before today. I listed it like inventory. Dark hair in the drain, even though I'm blonde, milk levels dropping, eggs missing, my toothbrush on the wrong side, toothpaste cap off, that chalky men's deodorant smell in the bathroom. Saying it all together made me feel ridiculous and sure at the same time. The older officer nodded once. That tracks. They dusted the backpack and the balcony handle for prints. The older one took photos and asked about cameras in the building. I said there are units in the lobby, but I've never seen the lights on. He said they'd check, but warned they're often dead. He said they'd file a report, canvass the neighbors, and push the landlord to fix the latch and secure the window. He was blunt. Without a working camera or a clear face, finding him might be hard. I repeated my description. Skinny, pale, black hair, early 20s, scared. They offered to wait while I called someone. I didn't have anyone nearby. The younger cop suggested a hotel for the night. The older one showed me how to brace the window with a dowel and told me to call a locksmith today if possible. They left a card and said to call if anything looked touched. When they left, I locked the door, set the chain, wedged it, and slid down the entry wall to the floor, shaking so hard my teeth hurt, counting breaths and picturing how many times he'd been here while I slept in the next room. So when I was 31, I had this routine with my dog Roxy, a 3-year-old German Shepherd. Every morning at 6:30 before work, we'd do the same walk through our neighborhood, past the school stadium, and back through a small park with a playground. Late October morning, still dark outside with only a few streetlights working, I noticed a cyclist on a mountain bike pass me heading toward the school. Nothing weird about that. Lots of people bike to work or the gym. But 5 minutes later, that same cyclist rode past me again in the opposite direction. Pretty slowly this time, and I caught him looking at me as he turned his head. Roxy pulled on the leash, wanting to sniff a bush, so I stopped to let her explore. 3 minutes later, when I reached the school fence, the cyclist appeared again. This time, he stopped about 50 meters ahead of me, got off his bike, and just stood there holding the handlebars, staring in my direction. He was wearing a dark hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, and I couldn't make out his face clearly because of the distance and poor lighting. The whole thing made me uncomfortable because this was obviously not a random encounter with a morning cyclist. I told myself, just keep moving, but not toward him. I decided not to continue my usual route and turned left onto a different street that led through a shopping center parking lot. It added 10 minutes to the walk, but I figured better safe than sorry. As I crossed the corner by the closed pharmacy, I listened for the sound of a chain or tires. Nothing. Just that empty early morning hum. After walking 1 block on the new path, I looked back and saw the cyclist riding behind me again, keeping about 30 meters distance, pedaling slowly. Roxy growled low in her throat, sensing my tension, and the fur on her back stood up. I tightened the leash, kept her close to my leg, and made my voice cheerful on purpose. "It's okay, girl. Heel." I pulled my phone out of my jacket pocket with my free hand. The screen blinded me for a second. I hit Carol's name. She lives 3 blocks from me, usually up by then, and put it on speaker. She didn't pick up, so I left a voicemail, deliberately speaking loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Carol, I'm almost at your house. Come outside, please. We need to get those boxes out of your car together. They're heavy." I added, "Derek can help too," which was dumb because Derek would still be home, but I wanted the words out there. The rider kept pace. I cut diagonally through the parking lot toward the strip of stores that faced the main road. A delivery truck idled by the supermarket bay. A guy in a reflective vest glanced at me and then back to his clipboard. I considered walking over and asking him to hang with me for a minute, but the cyclist slowed, put a shoe down, then started rolling again, like he was testing how close he could get without committing. I said, loud, "Roxy, leave it," and tugged. She stayed tight to me but made this deep rumble I've only heard when another dog gets in her space. It was a complete lie because I wasn't going to Carol's place at all, but I wanted to create the impression that someone was waiting for me and that I wasn't alone. I sped up my pace heading toward the main street with morning traffic and people at bus stops. I kept my shoulders straight and didn't look back for half a block, counting crosswalk squares under my breath to stay focused. When I did look, the cyclist was gone, disappeared around some turn, or maybe just reversed direction. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or adrenaline. I took the crosswalk on the walk signal, even though a jog would have gotten me there sooner. A bus hissed to a stop. 2 teenagers got off, heads down, earbuds in. I considered stepping onto that bus just to be around people, but it was going the wrong way, and I didn't want to end up stuck somewhere strange with Roxy. I practically ran the last 2 blocks to my house, cutting through our alley and into our yard. I fumbled the keys twice. The deadbolt stuck the way it sometimes does when the wood swells, and that small delay felt like a spotlight on my back. I burst inside, slammed the door, locked it with both locks, and stood there listening. Roxy was still keyed up, tail stiff, staring at the door like she expected it to knock back. I told my husband Derek everything in a rush. 3 sightings, the stopping, the following, the voicemail performance. He was buttoning his shirt for work and froze with one sleeve half on. "Do you want me to call someone?" he asked. "We can report it." He didn't actually do anything, I said, and hated how defensive that sounded. Derek grabbed his keys anyway. "I'll drive around and look. If he's lurking..." "No," I said, louder than I meant to. "If he sees the car circling, he'll know where we live. I think he was just..." I couldn't finish the sentence without lying. "Training, maybe." Our routes overlapped. Derek looked at me for a long second, weighing it. He's not reckless, but he's protective, and telling him not to go was its own gamble. "Okay," he said finally. "But get the mace by the door, and text Carol so she knows what's up. If you want, I'll be late. We can both take Roxy to daycare today." "I'll be fine," I said, then added, "I'll Uber to work." That part I meant. He kissed my forehead, clipped a kiss onto Roxy's nose, and left for work. I set the mace on the entry table, checked the window blinds, then checked them again. I spent the next hour sitting on the couch drinking coffee and trying to calm down. 4 days later, the local paper ran an article about attacks on women walking dogs in our neighborhood. 3 cases, all early mornings. The attacker rode up from behind on a bicycle, grabbed hair or clothing, tried to pull them into bushes. 2 women broke free because their dogs lunged. In the 3rd, a passing car scared him off. Police listed a medium-height male in a dark hoodie on a mountain bike and asked for tips. Same route, same hours, same description. My hands went numb reading it. I called the non-emergency line. The dispatcher put me through to a detective named Salazar. He asked me to start at the beginning. I told him about the first pass, the second pass, the stop by the school fence, and how he followed me through the shopping center. I told him about the voicemail to Carol. He let me talk, then said, "That's consistent. He scouts first. He circles to see who is alone." "He never touched me," I said. "Is this still useful?" "It's useful. You changed your route and made it sound like someone was waiting. That probably saved you." He asked about Roxy. I said she growled and her fur stood up. He took my info, asked for a written statement, and said they were adding patrols near the stadium and park. If you see him, call 911 and move toward people. Don't confront, I promised I would. After I hung up, I sent the article to our block chat and to Carol and saved the detective's number. For the next mornings, I changed everything. I left later, used the main road, and kept Roxy tight to heel. Derek offered to switch his schedule. I said maybe, but I wanted to see if the changes were enough. Nothing happened, just buses and commuters, but any chain rattle made my shoulders jump. They caught him 2 weeks later after he tried to grab a woman jogging near the middle school, and a teacher saw it. Patrol cars boxed him in by the next block. In his backpack, they found a folding knife and duct tape. He was a registered sex offender, released 6 months earlier, and barred from being near schools or parks. Hearing that made my face go hot and cold. A week after the arrest, I went in for a photo lineup. I recognized him by build and posture. "Number 3, I said. The prosecutor told me he had been riding pre-dawn for weeks, mapping routes and noting which stretches stayed empty. He had screenshots of the park schedule and the school calendar on his phone. All the incidents were clustered. At trial, I testified. The passes, the stop, the following, the call, the turn toward traffic. The defense said he might have been exercising and fear colored my memory. The prosecutor told the jury to look at the pattern, the backpack, and the release violations. The verdict came back guilty on multiple charges. The judge gave him 15 years. In the hallway after, I sat with Roxy's leash looped around my hand and let my breathing catch up. Now I only walk Roxy after sunrise and I stick to crowded streets. Derek says I'm leaning paranoid. Maybe. I don't care. That morning taught me to treat my gut like a tool, not drama. If it says something is wrong, I act like it's right until it isn't, because the cost of looking silly is nothing compared to not getting home. I also carry a small alarm now and share my route with Carol daily before I leave. It happened when I was 22 and working as a night receptionist at Friends Animal Clinic. It was my first steady job after college, and I was trying hard not to screw it up. I rented a small apartment with a roommate I barely saw, and the paycheck kept the lights on. The clinic sat in an industrial strip where everything felt shut off after dark. We were 24-hour emergency. From 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., it was just me. Calls, walk-ins, and watching the recovery ward. The on-call vet, Dr. Park, lived 10 minutes away and came in for anything serious. The main entrance stayed locked. The side door had a keypad and intercom. I checked the camera, decided if I'd buzz someone in, then did paperwork until something needed me. Most nights were quiet enough that even the soda machine sounded loud. That February night, snow piled up fast, and by 2 a.m., I'd had only 2 calls, both nervous owners who calmed down after I asked a few questions. Around 2, I was behind the counter entering vaccination forms into the system, earbuds in, a playlist low enough that I could still hear the phone. The intercom light flashed. I slid the headphones off and hit the monitor. The side lot looked like a blank sheet, tire tracks curving in from the road. A dark sedan sat crooked near the door, engine on, exhaust drifting. A man stood by the keypad holding a blanket bundle in both arms. He had on a winter jacket, hood up, face turned toward the camera like he wasn't sure where to look. I pressed the intercom. Friends Animal Clinic, how can I help you? I could hear a faint chime in the background, maybe his car door open, and then his voice came through. My cat fell from the balcony. She's breathing heavy. I need help. He didn't sound drunk. He didn't sound panicked either. Concerned, yes, but level, like he'd practiced the line in his head. I asked his name and the cat's. David Richardson. Bella. I repeated it back for the intake chart and told him I'd open the door and bring him into reception. My hand went to the latch control and stopped. I wasn't new. People with animals in crisis act a certain way. They come in crying, rambling, or half yelling. They ask if you're a real clinic like 3 times in a row. This guy's voice was steady, clipped. Not cold exactly, more like he was reading. Also, the way he was holding the cat was odd. Most people cradle close or have a carrier. He had the bundle away from his body, forearms tense. I told myself I was overthinking it. Snow, late, nerves. Still, I picked up the on-call phone and dialed Dr. Park. He answered on the second ring with the tired voice I knew too well. I summarized. Possible trauma, cat fell, owner at the door. Dr. Park said he'd head in, 15 minutes give or take. If breathing's bad, let them into reception and start paperwork. Keep them near you, he added. That helped, but not enough to erase the way the guy sounded. I thanked him, hung up, and looked back at the camera. The man was still there, but the frame had more now. Another shape to his right, near the corner where the building juts. It was a person, standing half in the shadow thrown by the awning, not moving. My first thought was maybe a partner. People don't always come alone. But the second figure didn't lean forward, didn't shift the bundle or try the keypad. Just stood there. I hit the intercom. Hi. I see there are 2 of you. Who's with you? The man turned his head toward the other figure like he'd forgotten he wasn't alone. My brother. He's helping. He said it quickly, then adjusted the blanket in his arms as if to prove there was weight inside. A corner sagged. I didn't see fur. I told myself it could be tucked deeper, or a towel over a carrier, something like that. Could your brother come closer to the camera so I can get both your names? I said it like policy. It's not a real rule, but it might as well be when you're alone at night. There was a pause long enough for me to hear the sedan's engine idle. The man rolled his shoulder like the bundle was heavy. The second figure didn't move. Sir, I tried again, keeping my voice neutral. We need full registration for emergencies. It'll be faster if I have both names. The first man stood a little straighter, then said, "Come on," over his shoulder. Another beat went by. Nothing. He glanced back at the shadow, then at the lens. His mouth tightened. He's coming. The second shape finally peeled away from the corner and stepped into the light strip over the door. He was about my height, maybe a bit taller, but his posture was stiff, arms down like he was trying hard to look casual and couldn't figure out how. My stomach clenched even before I could see why. The guy had his hands inside his jacket pockets, elbows pressed to his sides, and he didn't look up until he was square under the light. "Name?" I asked, my finger hovering over the door control I suddenly wasn't going to touch. He lifted his head and faced the camera. He was wearing a balaclava covering his whole face except his eyes. My heart sank. Nobody comes to a vet clinic in a ski mask. I let go of the intercom and grabbed my phone. I dialed 911 with my thumb shaking so hard I had to hit the number twice. The man outside shouted something I couldn't make out, and then slammed his fist into the metal door. I told the operator the clinic's name, the cross streets, that there were 2 men at the side entrance, one in a mask. The banging got louder. "Open up! We need help! Open the door, now!" The operator's voice was steady in my ear. "Officers are en route. Do not open the door. Stay on the line." I moved from behind the counter to the far wall where the monitors were stacked. I wanted the desk between us, but the wall felt safer. On the screen, I watched the first guy step back and shoulder the door like it might pop. It didn't. The second one looked up into the camera for a beat like he could see me, then they ran out of frame toward the front. I cycled the cameras. The main entrance was all glass, but locked and reinforced. They tugged the handles anyway, The one without the mask shoved a hand into his pocket and pulled out something long and dark. He tested it against the seam of the doors. Crowbar. I heard the brittle sound of it sliding against metal. "They're trying to break in," I said, too loud. "They have a tool. Crowbar, maybe. They're at the front now." The operator said again not to engage, to stay out of sight. I crouched and peeked over the monitors. Useless habit. The masked one tried to wedge the bar near the lock. The other kept looking over his shoulder at the lot like he was timing something. I thought about setting off the internal alarm, then remembered it was already tripped by the 911 call. The masked one hit the glass with his shoulder. The doors rattled. I felt stupidly aware of the oxygen going in and out of my lungs. I checked the side door camera again, making sure no one had doubled back. Nothing. The lot camera showed the sedan idling, the exhaust smearing into the snow. Seconds stretched. The operator told me the patrol was close. I pressed the phone to my ear so hard it hurt. Another slam on the glass. Then a sound cut through everything. The rising wail of a siren turning into the lot. The men froze. I watched both heads snap toward the sound. The bar clanged against the concrete. For 1 second they stood there like they couldn't decide which way to run. They bolted. The one in the mask scooped up the blanket from the snow near the side door, dropped it halfway to the car, and just left it. The sedan fishtailed as they jumped in. Tires spun, then caught. They shot out of the lot, took the turn too wide, and disappeared into the dark road. The siren got louder, and then the cruiser swung in, lights bouncing off the glass. I didn't move until the operator said, "They're there." I hung up and watched 2 officers step out, hands up in that open way they do when they know someone is scared inside. I hit the intercom and said I was alone and I would buzz them around to the side. My hands were steadier with the keypad than with the phone. They came in slow, checked the corners, then one came to me while the other circled outside. "Are you okay?" he asked. I said yes, but it came out thin. He asked what I saw, and I pointed to the monitors. We rewound enough to watch the sequence. He went out to the blanket and brought it in with 2 fingers. It was an old sweater rolled into a lump, wet from the snow, nothing else. "No cat," he said, like he needed to make sure I was seeing it too. I nodded. We couldn't catch the plate. The snow and angle made it a blur. He took the best frame stills anyway. They walked the perimeter, found the pry marks on the main doors, and photographed them. "Most likely a smash and grab," one of them said. "Meds, equipment, easy to flip." They asked if we had ketamine or anything controlled. I gave the list from the binder. He wrote fast and told me to call if anyone came back or if I remembered anything else. They waited until I locked the side door behind them and then parked out front with the lights off. Dr. Park showed up about 20 minutes later, hair damp from a rushed shower, eyes scanning every surface before he even looked at me. I told him what happened in order and he kept saying "okay" at each point, not interrupting. When I got to the mask, he blew out a breath and shook his head. "You did the right thing. Don't open for anything you don't trust." He checked the locks, checked the kennels, checked the drug cabinet even though it was untouched. He started coffee and sat with me until my hands stopped shaking. The next day the owner came in early, watched the footage, and by noon had a security company on the phone. New cameras went up that week. A guard started the following Monday. I made it 2 more weeks. Every time the intercom light flicked, I felt that cold spike, and I'd hear the flat way that guy said "my brother," like he had to think of the word first. Quitting felt weak, and also like the only decision that made sense. I still replay it sometimes. That moment I asked the second guy to come to the camera. It didn't feel brave, more like stalling, but it was enough. I don't know what would have happened if I'd buzzed them in. I don't need to know. When I was 8 years old, my family spent a weekend camping at Joshua Tree National Park. It was something we did every summer, me, my parents, and my younger brother Tyler. That year, I decided I wasn't a little kid anymore. I told my mom I could go look at the rocks we'd seen the evening before. She said, "As far as we can see you, okay?" And my dad added, "Don't be a smart aleck." They were busy with a new canopy, my dad trying to pretend he knew how it all fit, while my mom held poles and Tyler kept stepping on the guy lines. The rocks looked close, maybe 200 yards. I got there fast, felt proud, and should have turned back. I didn't. There was a thin path between creosote bushes that looked interesting, and I convinced myself I could remember every turn. One path became two became three, and I kept going. I used my own little system, left at the funny cactus, right at the split rock, but funny and split start to look the same after a while. I thought I was being brave. Really, I was getting lost, and I didn't know it yet. 5 minutes later, maybe 10, maybe more, the tent and the car were gone behind me. I still thought if I climbed a little higher, I'd see the canopy or my dad's red cooler, or at least hear Tyler complaining. I kept picking landmarks, a round boulder, a bent cholla, a flat patch of sand. None of it meant anything. I know that now. Back then, I talked to myself. It's fine. You know the way I didn't. When it finally hit me, really hit me, the sun was already sharp and high. Everything looked copied and pasted. Same bushes, same rocks, same pale dirt that didn't hold a footprint. I tried to follow my tracks anyway, squinting at the ground like a detective from TV. But the sand was hard and my shoes barely made a mark. I called out once, then louder. The sound just died in the air. After a while, I sat down. I didn't have water because I told myself I'd be right back. I remember the hot feeling in my face and the stupid hiccup crying I couldn't stop. I thought about my mom's tone when she meant it and my dad's look when he was disappointed. None of that helped. That's when I saw the coyote. It stood maybe 30 feet away, not moving, like it had been there the whole time. I froze because my parents always said stay away from wild animals. I pictured ugly teeth and rabies from a school assembly. But it didn't snarl or lower its head. It just watched me. A minute later, it could have been 10 seconds or 2 minutes, the coyote turned and walked off. Not in a hurry, just steady. It wasn't random either. It chose a line and stuck to it. I don't know why I got up. Maybe because sitting felt like waiting to be in trouble. Maybe because the coyote looked like it knew what it was doing. I followed, not too close. I told myself I'd ditch the plan if it went somewhere sketchy. It would walk, stop, look back, like, "Are you coming?" Then keep going. Every time it paused, I paused. We moved like that for a while. 20 minutes, maybe 30. It weaved around boulders and through low brush. I tried to keep a second set of landmarks in my head, just in case, but I was already mixing them up. I remember my mouth felt dry and my arms tingled. The coyote never sped up. It never tried to come closer than it already had. It would trot, stop, glance, trot. I started copying its pace, tiny legs working to keep up without running. Then I heard something faint. Voices. At first I thought I imagined them, the way you think you hear your name at a grocery store. But they came back, closer, clearer. My dad's deep shout, my mom's higher call, Tyler yelling because that's how he yells for everything. The coyote climbed a small rise, a little hump of rock and sand, stopped at the top, turned its head back at me one last time, and slipped out of sight behind a cluster of rocks like it had never been there. I kept going up. From the top I saw our camp spread out below. The half-built canopy, the car, the cooler, my mom waving both arms like she was trying to hail a helicopter. We were only a few hundred yards away. I didn't think. I ran. My legs went jelly halfway down and I had to half scoot a couple of times, but I kept moving. My dad met me first, grabbed me hard by the shoulders, then hugged me so tight it hurt. My mom cried in that way where she's mad and relieved and scared all at once. Tyler said, "You're in so much trouble." And then he started crying too. My dad kept asking, "Where were you? Which way did you go?" I tried to explain, pointing back at the rise. I was lost. A coyote showed me I said it plain. I didn't dress it up. He stared at me like he was checking for a joke. A coyote. I nodded. It kept looking back, I said. It walked and I followed and then I heard you, and it went away. My mom asked where it went and I pointed at the rocks, but I didn't see it anymore. My dad wiped his face with his shirt and looked out toward the rise like he might see it standing there, waiting. He didn't. He looked back at me, at my scratched knees and dusty hands. "Coyotes usually avoid people," he said slowly, still studying my face, "especially during the day, and they rarely behave the way you just described." About 20 minutes later, a white truck rolled up with a park emblem on the door. A ranger stepped out, mid-30s maybe, sunglasses, hat, the whole thing. He checked me over like he'd done this 1,000 times, asked my name, age, if I felt dizzy, if my head hurt. He handed me a small bottle of water, told me to sip slow, not gulp. My mom kept saying thank you on a loop while my dad tried to act calm and failed. The ranger crouched so he was eye level with me and asked, "Can you tell me what happened?" I told him the same story I told my parents. I said I followed a path, lost track of the camp, sat down, and then a coyote showed up and walked, stopping to look back, and I followed it until I heard my parents. I tried to be clear, in case it mattered. He listened without interrupting, then nodded. "Coyotes sometimes follow lost people," he said. "Especially kids. Usually it's curiosity, or they're used to handouts near campgrounds. They're opportunists." He said the last part like a small lecture for my parents. I wouldn't read too much into it showing you the way. It was probably heading towards smells and noise. You interpreted it as help because you were scared. He said it gentle, not mocking. My mom looked relieved, like reality had been restored. My dad kept glancing at the rise where I said it vanished. "I get that," I said. But it kept looking back. He shrugged. "They checked their surroundings. They want to know where the person is, the same way you were watching it." He stood and told my parents signs to watch for: headache, confusion, dry mouth that won't go away. He pointed at the sun and said we still had hours of heat left and to keep me shaded. He suggested moving the canopy to catch more breeze, and my dad actually listened. Before he left, he told me, "You did one good thing, you moved. Sitting still can be bad out here if nobody knows where you are. But next time, you tell your folks exactly where you're going, and you stay where they can see you." I nodded because there was nothing else to say. He handed my dad a pamphlet that might as well have been titled, "You Have a Kid Who Wanders." After he drove off, my mom wouldn't let go of my hand. She kept squeezing it, like checking I was solid. I kept thinking about the way the coyote paused. The memory is stuck in a loop. The turn of its head, the short stop, how it waited until the rise, and then it was gone the moment I saw the tents. I know how coincidence works. I know we see patterns where we want them. But I also remember the quiet decision I made when I stood up to follow it. I followed the only living thing in a place that felt empty. That part isn't romantic. It's practical. We didn't pack up and go home. My dad said leaving would make it a bigger deal, and he wasn't wrong. But the rest of the weekend was different. My mom tracked me with her eyes like a hawk. My dad set a rule. If I couldn't answer when he shouted my name, I was too far. Tyler got the same rule and tried to push it exactly once. My dad shut that down in one sentence. I stayed close. Every time I glanced toward the rise, I half expected to see that shape again. I didn't. No one else seemed to care. People set up grills, kids rode bikes between sites, and the day went on. We all pretended we were fine, and by the second night, maybe we were. I don't tell it as a magical tale. I tell it so my kids hear the part about how fast you can get lost even when you swear you know the way, and how the desert doesn't care that you're confident. The ranger told us a child my size could have been in real trouble if I'd stayed out there much longer. Those afternoons hit triple digits, and without water, your brain goes sideways faster than you think. I was lucky a coyote appeared, and lucky it happened to head towards sound and human smell, whether that was its plan or just its stomach. My parents were rattled the rest of that trip. My mom shadowed me like a second spine, and my dad enforced the voice distance rule and made us review the plan every hour. That day drilled in a rule I carry into everything now. Respect the place you're in, and don't assume you'll be fine because you mean well. And yeah, I also tell them that sometimes help shows up in a shape you don't expect, and you don't have to explain it to be grateful. So about 2 years ago, I was working morning shifts at this small, independent coffee shop in the downtown area. I opened a lot. Lights on at 5:30, grinders humming by 5:45, doors at 6. If you've ever worked mornings, you know how fast you learn faces. I could call out, "Large drip, splash of oat," before some folks even reached the register. Regulars treated me like a clock. They saw me. They knew they weren't late. It was steady. Decent tips, and by week 2, I had a mental map of who wanted what and where they liked to sit. One day this new customer came in, a woman maybe mid-30s, neat bob, expensive-looking purse. She waited until the line died and then introduced herself. "I'm Patricia," like we were at some networking event. She stood at the menu for a long time and asked what would work best for her book club. "They're not coffee snobs, but I want something nicer than grocery store," she said. I walked her through a couple of medium roasts we had, talked grind size for drip versus French press, asked how many people she was serving. She listened like she was taking notes. She bought 2 bags of beans, asked if I could write the brew ratio on the bag, thanked me, and left. For the next 2 weeks, she came in once or twice a week. Always at off-peak times, always with a question. "How do you store beans? Is pour-over really better?" She wasn't flirty, just very focused. Sometimes she'd laugh at her own confusion, and I'd reassure her that half the coffee world is made up rules anyway. She'd leave with a pastry or another bag and a, "See you soon, Ethan." It felt normal. We had curious customers all the time. After about a month, Patricia started showing up almost every day. She'd buy a small Americano, no room, and sit by the window with her laptop for hours. 3, sometimes 4. She always picked the same table where she could see the counter, and I could see her out of the corner of my eye. I'd ask how the book club was going, and she'd say, "Oh, we aren't meeting right now," or "We're between books." Nothing specific. I chalked it up to weird scheduling. We had freelancers who camped all day too. Downtown runs on people with laptops. My coworkers teased me about having a fan. "Your window wife is back," Eric would say when he clocked in. I'd roll my eyes and keep steaming milk. I wasn't interested. Also, customers bring their own baggage in here. If you read into everyone's habits, you'll lose your mind. Then one morning my manager, Sarah, pulled me aside. "Hey," she said quiet. "I came in early and saw Patricia outside. She was taking pictures through the glass. Of you. We weren't even open." She mimed a phone held at chest height. It wasn't subtle. Sarah told me again before my next shift, so I'd take it seriously. "If she does anything that makes you uncomfortable, step in the back and call me," she said. So I started paying attention. It wasn't hard. Patricia would arrive, order from me even if Eric was right there, and then just watch. On my days off, she still came. I know because the others told me she'd ask, "Is Ethan in today?" in this casual voice, and then hang around anyway. About a week later, the gifts started. A Tupperware of family recipe cookies. A paperback about the history of espresso that made me think of you. Once, an expensive scarf in a small boutique bag with tissue paper still crisp. I kept my tone friendly but clear. "I can't accept gifts, company policy," I said, and I meant it. Boundaries are easier when you can point to a rule. Patricia would smile and say, "Oh, it's nothing," and leave the bag on the end of the counter. I'd slide it behind the pastry case for Sarah to deal with. We logged them just in case and tossed the food after closing. I didn't eat anything from strangers. That's not paranoia. That's a restaurant rule that keeps you alive. I tried being more distant, shorter answers, redirecting to other baristas, but she adjusted. She'd compliment the latte art, ask about our new grinder, comment on music. I stopped telling her my schedule. I stopped telling any customers honestly. Sarah offered to talk to her, but at that point it was just odd. Not a policy violation I could point to besides the photos, which Sarah hadn't confronted her about yet, because she didn't want to escalate over something she hadn't personally witnessed again. One evening after my shift, I left by the side door, took my usual route toward the bus. It was already getting dark. I kept my head down, earbuds in with nothing playing, just to discourage small talk. At the first light, I had that feeling, like someone matching your pace behind you. I glanced at a window's reflection and saw her. Patricia. 30-ish meters back. Same neat haircut, same purse strap across her shoulder, no laptop now. I told myself it was a coincidence. It's a busy area, people overlap. I crossed, she crossed. I cut down a block I don't usually take. She did too. Not close enough to bump into me. Just there. I decided to test it in a way that wouldn't make a scene. I stopped at a storefront and looked at a display I didn't care about. I didn't touch my phone. I just stood and waited. A beat later, she slowed as well, half a dozen strides back, and lifted her phone like she'd gotten a text. She didn't type. She didn't even unlock it. She just stood there pretending to look at her phone. Next day, I told Sarah what happened, and she came up with a plan. She didn't overreact. She just listened, asked me to go over the route again, and then said, "All right, we'll make it obvious." The idea was simple and safe. No confrontations, no hero moves. Make it clear I wasn't available, make it public, and make sure a bunch of witnesses saw it. If Patricia was testing boundaries, we'd put one up she couldn't miss. That evening when I was finishing my shift, the cafe was steady, not slammed. Patricia was in her usual corner seat by the window, laptop open, not typing. She'd already done the thing where she waited for me to take her order even though Eric was free. I kept my head down, worked the queue, and tried to look like I didn't see her. Sarah came in from the back before close, grabbed a rag, and made a show of wiping down the pastry case. Then, loud enough for the room, she said, "Hey, Ethan, wait so I can give you a ride home after closing." It was exactly the line we agreed on. I said, "Yeah, thanks," like we'd done this 100 times. Sarah walked around the counter, put her arm around my shoulders, and kissed me on the cheek. It wasn't romantic. It was clear. It was for the audience. The two students at the bar smirked. Eric raised his eyebrows and went back to dishes. I didn't look at Patricia yet. The scrape of a chair cut through the room. Patricia stood up fast. She didn't even close the laptop. She just snapped it shut and grabbed it by the edge. She walked to the trash and tossed her half-finished coffee like she couldn't stand to hold it. Then she headed for the door and slammed it behind her. It wasn't a push either. The bell rattled against